Steelers radio network host and a man who's been covering this team forever and a day. Our friend Gerry Dulac is back. How you doing, Gerry?
Hey, Rich, I am good. I hope you are too, brother. All well, though, other than being very busy, as you can imagine.
I am sure. And we thought, when we first initially reached out to you this week, that by this point in time of the week, we'd have a little bit more clarity than we clearly do right now when you and I are talking 1 Eastern time on Thursday of new league year week. What's going on with the Steelers right now, best you can tell, Gerry?
Yeah, I thought when we made preliminary plans that was going to interfere with, a possible, a deal being done. And here we are 4 days in from the start of the legal tampering period, and nothing. I was told last night around 10 o'clock that, the issue, it's not about money. I thought maybe that Aaron Rodgers was going to be playing one side off the other to up the ante because there aren't many other options out there, both for Rodgers and, of course, for the Steelers. But that's not the case. I was told that it's not about money. It's just about him taking his time, basically Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers and not in any hurry to commit to anything. And so the question then to be begged is, how long will this go on? What is the Steelers' timetable? Rich, I don't know that they have a timetable, to be honest with you. I haven't been told that there is one or isn't one. And I think the fact that Russell Wilson decided to go interview with the Browns today and the Giants tomorrow, according to a report, would indicate that he is getting impatient too, because he all along has wanted to come back to the Steelers. And I think that he was thinking that was possibly going to be the case, and it is a possibility. But I think maybe he thinks, look, I got to look out for myself, and I'm tired of waiting as well. And so out he goes to go visit a couple other teams.
All right, so let's take this one at a time. What is the question that Rodgers needed answered by the Steelers, best you can tell, that he's sitting on right now?
I don't know that answer, Rich. And of course, the way Aaron Rodgers is, I'm not sure anybody knows that answer. If you look at the two options that he allegedly has, the Giants and the Steelers, well, the Steelers would be a no-brainer because, one, the Giants won 3 games last year. The Steelers were a playoff team. 2, the Giants have the 3rd overall pick in the draft. They're going to take a quarterback. And why would Aaron Rodgers want to go across the town and walk into a situation where the fans are just waiting to clamor for the rookie number 1? And so going to the Giants makes zero amount of sense unless their offer is ridiculous, which New York teams tend to do, which is what we saw with Justin Fields. So you would think the Steelers would be the best landing spot for him, especially because of Mike Tomlin, as opposed to Brian Daboll. Nothing against him, but I have to think that unless he decides to retire, that the Steelers are the best spot for him.
Okay, and what about the Vikings? Isn't that an option? Wouldn't that be more of a viable option? You think that's a threat to the Steelers getting Rodgers than the Giants then, Gerry?
Perhaps, except at the same deal. You're dealing with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, they let Sam Darnold go after 14-3 because they know J.J. McCarthy's their guy. So why would he want to walk into that situation where he knows everybody wants, the fans and everybody want to see J.J. McCarthy? So again, if that's a possibility, that doesn't make any sense to me either. But then, hey, Aaron Rodgers doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Rich.
And he said... Any sense? You caught me with that one, Gerry.
I'm glad I did. It's hard to do, Rich.
No, that's okay. Is there any sense of how long of a commitment the Steelers are willing to give Rodgers, Gerry?
Well, I can't, to be honest, I can't imagine it's more than 2 years. And if it is, it would only probably be because of cap purposes. Rich, they had talks with Sam Darnold. And so Sam Darnold would have been more of a 3-year type of deal. But Aaron Rodgers, I think it's going to be 1 year and no more than 2. And again, if it's 2, it might be just to spread out some cap space. But I don't think their intention is to go anything longer than that. I think it's the same situation as Russell Wilson last year. Bring in a proven guy who's won a Super Bowl, who's probably headed to the Hall of Fame, to try to immediately get this thing back on track by winning a playoff game. And the immediacy is still a big point of emphasis for them. Bring in the guy that can immediately get them back on track. Not be a Super Bowl contender necessarily, because I don't think they're that. But how about winning a playoff game? And I think that's where they are. Russell Wilson had a one-year deal. We know all the financial implications with what he was owed from Denver. But I think it's a very similar situation. And I couldn't imagine it being any more than 2 years, Rich.
So then let's talk about the fit of Rodgers and the Steelers, Jerry, because I've said here that if I was Rodgers, I'd be working nonstop to get to the Steelers. And I've been saying that the Steelers should want Rodgers based on the current landscape of everything that's going on right now. And I get so much pushback from Steelers fans saying this is such not a Steeler move. And for two reasons. One, let's take one at a time. First one is that for all the years that the Rooneys have been there, and certainly Tomlin with the Rooneys, ayahuasca is maybe the name of an outside linebacker of South American descent that they'd be interested in. You know what I mean? So how is Rodgers a fit with this organization, Jerry?
Well, Rich, I really don't think he is. And I think this move is being orchestrated by Mike Tomlin. Now, Mike Tomlin's not going to tell Art Rooney II what to do, but there is no question in my mind this is something that he wants to happen. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, Rich, same deal. The majority of the feedback I get is pushback. Steeler fans are somewhat surprised that the Steelers would want a player with, let's face it, some I don't want to say character issues, but he's a different duck, as we all know. And so he's going to be 42. His team won 5 games last year, and he had Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard to throw to. The Steelers didn't have that here. Of course, they've added, DK Metcalf, but I don't think he's a great fit. And here's the other thing. If Arthur Smith had problems with the way Russell Wilson wanted to play last year, what do you think he's going to have happen with Aaron Rodgers, a guy who's already had 2 head coaches fired when it came to a headbutt? So now I say that, and I know Arthur Smith would love to have Aaron Rodgers, but I don't know that, to use Terry Bradshaw's old expression, I don't know that he's as much of a mailman as he is a gunslinger. So if the Steelers want to run the ball, Aaron Rodgers has thrown over 500 passes each of his last 6 seasons. For all those reasons, I don't think it's a great fit.
Pushing back a little bit here is I don't think Rodgers got Saleh fired. I got to be pushing back there, and certainly
that's fine.
McCarthy and him might not have seen eye to eye, but that run seemed to be over as well. But and the locker room again, I tongue firmly planted in cheek with ayahuasca, because that is, part and part. That did happen last year, where he did go on a previously planned trip to Egypt, just as there was a mandatory mini camp that the Jets easily could have moved but didn't. There was stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know was his doing or not. But I do bring this up because there is part and parcel of Rodgers that other quarterbacks that they could be interested in don't bring to the equation. In the same way, there are things that Russ brings to the equation that Rodgers doesn't. But one thing that you did say earlier, Jerry, is the Steelers are in a position of let's get a veteran in here just to win a playoff game. Steelers fans always push back. It never used to be, hey, let's win the wild card. It's let's win the Super Bowl. And that's where the question is why aren't the Steelers just looking at a rookie class, if it's not this year or next, and going and finding the next Big Ben, going and finding your next Josh Allen or your next Lamar, your next Patrick? I understand that those are tough to find, but the Steelers haven't appeared to be in that game the last couple of drafts, Jerry.
Right. Well, Rich, as you know, they did that with Kenny Pickett, and of course that didn't work out. But I think that is the next step in this equation. There's no question about it. And that's why I thought the safe thing this year would have been you bring back Russell Wilson. Let's face it, they won 10 games. Yeah, I know Justin Fields started the season. But, there were a lot of good things with Russell Wilson leading up to the beginning of December until they lost those final 5 games, including the playoffs. So I thought bringing back Russell Wilson and then addressing the position in the draft, maybe not as high as you would think they would need to go. There's probably only 2 quarterbacks. So let's face it, 2 are going to go in the first 3 picks. But I think regardless, I think you will see them try to take a quarterback, one of the guys they like, maybe into the third round if they are still there. But I don't think there's any question, if not this year, then next year. That is the way they're going to go because they can't keep playing musical chairs with veteran quarterbacks. You know, they brought Mason Rudolph back. Good for him. I like Mason. They brought him in to be a backup, not to be a potential starter. You know, this thing is still going to be worked out. At least certainly the Steelers hope so with Rodgers in their favor. But I don't think there's any question. Look, they're not stupid. They know it's time to go back to the draft and find a quarterback. The question's just going to be how high, and is it this year or next year? When next year they might have to make a move to move up even higher.
Any names in this year's draft? Dart,
well,
Shuck.
I know.
What do you got for me on that front?
Well, I know they like Jackson Dart, and I know they like Will Howard, despite how he looked at the combine. You know, and there were about 5 or 6 guys they scouted at the combine heavily, but I would say probably those 2 if you're looking for somebody higher than normal as opposed to maybe a 4th and 5th round pick.
Interesting. A few minutes left here with Gerry Dulac, who's been again covering the Steelers forever and a day. Let's talk Russ. You know, he would be welcomed back in the building if if Rodgers says no, or how did things end that you're willing to share or that you know, and how are things potentially moving forward with him?
Yeah, I don't think, Rich, I don't think the players had a problem with Russ. You know, Russ is a pro's pro, and okay, I can't speak to what happened in Seattle or Denver. But what I know happened with his relationship with the offensive coordinator is maybe some of the stuff that happened in his other 2 places. But, Russ is always trying to be a leader. That's both offensively and defensively. And so I don't think the players would have a huge problem with him being back. But there is no question if that would happen, then Russell and Arthur Smith have to be put in a room and sat down and told, look, whatever differences occurred here at the end of the season, you guys better hammer it out because this is the way it is. And if you don't, there's going to be a problem. So I don't know that the players would have an issue. Maybe some of the coaches would have an issue. But I don't know that it would be a problem internally in the locker room. Because to me, Rich, look, you're going to need some stability, and having the same quarterback 2 years in a row for them is some semblance of a stability for a franchise that had a quarterback for 18 years. So to me, that's why I thought that was the safest move for them.
Well, ironing things out internally appears to be a Tomlin lane that he's an expert at. So anything, though, that you know details on the Smith Russ headbutt that we could point to in a game and go, well, this is what happened between these 2, and that's why things kind of fell apart last year?
The irony of the whole thing, Rich, is it occurred after the Steelers won in Cincinnati and put up 44 points, their most in 6 years, and Russell Wilson threw for 414 yards, the second highest total of his career. And that was the culmination of a 7-game stretch in which the Steelers were averaging nearly 29 points a game. We haven't seen that since, even before Big Ben's final season. And so the offense started looking like a unit that was capable of bailing out the defense. The Cincinnati game being a perfect example. The Bengals put up 38 points. Joe Burrow threw for 330 or 340, and Russell Wilson outdueled him and outscored him. So that was an example of where this offense was. And then I think it became an issue where, Russell wanted to attack down the field. He loves to throw that moon ball. And I think Arthur Smith wanted maybe, to develop the run game a little bit more. Russ was audibly getting out of plays a little bit more maybe than Arthur Smith would have liked. I can't point to any one example. I could just tell you whatever was occurring, it was enough that it was becoming frustrating, and it was becoming more of a problem, I think, with Arthur Smith. I don't want to say that it was for Russ, but he wanted to play one way and Arthur Smith wanted to play another.
Gerry Dulac here on the Rich Eisen Show. And just going back to what you said earlier in our conversation when you said that Rodgers might get a monetary offer from the New York teams that are larger because they're New York teams, and you mentioned the Jets. I thought you were going to mention the Jets contract that they had with Rodgers. Instead, you went Fields. Called that offer ridiculous. What do you mean by that, Gerry?
Well, Rich, this whole situation started unraveling. The first stone that was thrown for the Steelers in the Steelers situation was that Justin Fields wanted to test the free agent market. And that's what kind of delayed that whole process where are the Steelers deciding between Fields and Wilson, but knowing, obviously, that Justin Fields wanted to test the free agent market. And I'm sure they didn't expect him to get that kind of offer. Rich, the guy won 10 games in 3 years in Chicago and played 6 games last year. That is really not a quality body of work to get a $40 million 2-year deal. And so, but that's what we see in free agency. And that's what we see from teams like the Jets and the Browns who make decisions like that. And so once that happened and he wanted to test the free agent market, then bang, he gets a contract right away from the Jets like that. And then now it all starts. But at that point in time, though, too, Rich, knowing that Justin Fields was going to test the free agent market, the Steelers had already made the decision that they're going to look outside as well. And that started with Sam Darnold and Aaron Rodgers.
Interesting, man. I don't know. I mean, the Steelers are waiting on Rodgers, and plan B would be maybe bringing Russ back. You did have Fields in the building, and I know $20 million a year for somebody in that body of work. I understand your point of view from that, but I don't know. I mean, you could have gone with Fields, and he would have been the young Turk.
That's right. That's right.
And they're in Pittsburgh, and you could have basically said to the Steeler fan base, you know what, we're going to go with the young guy and see what he's got rather than bringing in another veteran. I don't know, because right now they're sitting there waiting for Aaron and hoping Rich, he says yes, right?
I couldn't agree more. That would have been this not only the simplest way, but probably the best plan of attack. And I will tell you that I think Arthur Smith would have preferred nothing against Aaron Rodgers. I'm not talking about him,
sure.
But if it came down to Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, I think he and a few other coaches, offensive coaches, would have preferred Justin Fields for a number of reasons. His age, for one, he's 26. We know Aaron Rodgers is going to be 42. You know, his mobility, his speed. They saw that he did win 4 of those 6 starts to begin the season. And so I think they were comfortable going with Russell Fields for the reasons you mentioned, and then seeing, okay, what can we do with this guy? Because they saw the progress that he made from those 3 miserable years. I don't want to say miserable, but those 3 down years in Chicago.
Yeah, no doubt. Because, I mean, if you want to talk about the most un-Steelers-like move,
this is it.
Well,
this is it.
this would be it. Giving a wide receiver $30 million a year with no plan at quarterback. You know, that is you want to talk about un-Steelers-like move. So that'll be the last thing I ask you before I let you go on with your Thursday, with your phone no doubt buzzing or ringing off the hook, is why did they make this DK move, figuring, I guess, let's get him in and without a quarterback plan at present, Gerry?
Well, I think the plan was that they would have Darnold or Aaron Rodgers. And you know, Russell Wilson was always in the equation. It wasn't like he wasn't being considered. He was just down their totem pole. But I think they made that deal with that in mind, that they were going to get one of these 2 guys in free agency. And so obviously that hasn't happened. It certainly hasn't happened as of yet, of course. I mean, Rich, I am surprised. $150 million contract over 5 years. It blows my mind to a degree that the Steelers would hand out that kind of deal over 5 years. Now, I grant you, I'm sure it is structured. They're not stupid. They're the best in the league at this. I'm sure it's structured where in the back years it won't hurt them a whole lot if for any reason they have to get out of it. Who knows? But I think what it does do, Rich, is I think it puts George Pickens on even a shorter list of a shorter leash of remaining with the Steelers. I'm not saying anytime soon, but hey, they wouldn't mind trying to get that number 2 pick back that they lost in the DK Metcalf trade. And I don't know that George Pickens was going to get a second contract with the Steelers anyway, with all the issues that he seems to bring to the table.
So watch this space between now and the draft, is what you're saying.
Not so much in it with the draft. I could see the Steelers going into the season. Why wouldn't they? Because they're really building up their receiving room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any question. It can become a strength, and right now is much improved. They will address a receiver in the draft probably by day 2, certainly by round 4. They have a Roman Wilson coming back, their 3rd round pick, who missed all of last year. So all of a sudden, if they draft a guy, now their receiving room looks pretty strong, unlike last year. So no, I don't know that it's anything that's going to happen immediately, because now you weaken that room a little bit. I just don't see them going forward with George Pickens with all the antics that they've had to deal with in the 3 years that he's been here.
Jerry, never a shortage of things to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. It's great.
Never is, Rich.
Jerry, thanks for taking the call. And, I have a feeling we're going to be talking again real soon, Jerry. I have that feeling, if you're willing.
Anytime, Rich. I always enjoy chatting with you.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it. Same here. That's Gerry Dulac, always giving us the 411 about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, my gosh, is there a lot to review from that conversation? Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.